Good morning. Welcome to the BlackUSA.News morning show. My name's Donnie Glover here with John Rydell. How are you, John?
I'm great. How you doing?
Good. Haven't seen you in a minute.
Has been a few. Yeah.
What have you been working on?
It's not an awful lot, but a little bit of freelancing here and there. And I talked to a colleague yesterday. I do another Zoom session for another group, and he's a freelance White House correspondent, and he covered the Capitol on January 6th. And that was pretty interesting to get his recollections of that day. He was actually assaulted by one of the protesters, rioters, I guess it was. So that was pretty interesting. And he's still very upset about it. And they didn't catch it. It was crazy. He was outside the Capitol. He didn't go inside, and he was just trying to get away because he saw that all hell was breaking loose. And as he was trying to get back to Union Station, this guy came up, started cursing and assaulting. That's just very, it's just, you're doing your job. He's out there and he's shooting video, and he's attacked. So it's a mess.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Nobody likes to be attacked for who they are, and no matter who you are. So, nobody should be attacked anyhow. So it was bizarre, and then that's it. That whole January 6th retrospective is far from over. Washington Post is doing they're doing a very in-depth series that they've been working months on. That really peels back, who was behind it. Were members of Congress involved in the planning of it? Did they give some private tours? So that's still unfolding. Pretty bizarre.
We've just been joined by attorney Neil Dubo. Good morning, Neil.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Donnie, how are you?
Good. Willie, any thoughts on J6? Are people in your circles talking about it still?
We moved on. Initially, I was very surprised. Not surprised because I think this was coordinated. I think the lead up was all of the, the sacking of the state capitals. We should have known something. It was leading to something. I do think that it was probably spontaneous with President Trump being at his last appearance in Washington, D.C. on that day, and he energized it. But it was no differently again. If you remember 2016, all of the conventions or the rallies were just the same energy, and that energy kept going. And quite frankly, that energy started with the Tea Party going to the Capitol during the first year of President Obama's administration. So, this is not, this is consistent with this type of rage that people overlook, but it's in the energy of, certain demographics. I won't get into deep into that, but strangely enough, Black people get accused of it, and we get police for it. So, in this situation at the Capitol, I don't think that they were warned about it, and all that has come out through the FBI. They were warned about it, but they didn't prepare the same way they prepare when Black people peacefully protest. So it's all weird. I guess it's expected, but somebody should be thrown in jail, thrown drug in the street, or whatever you do to people who actually do the things that we convict Black African people for, and that hasn't happened yet.
So, Neil, you've seen racial tension before. What do you think of J6? Any thoughts on J6?
Yeah, I have a lot, and I want to pick up on what John and Willie said, because I think there's actually a bigger issue going on here. I think we do ourselves a disservice when all we do is look backwards at January 6th. There are hard coups and there are soft coups. What was attempted on January the 6th was actually, you can draw a straight line from President Trump's speech on election night saying, frankly, we did win this election, all the way to January 6th, in an attempt to undo the legitimate outcome of the election. That was an attempted hard coup, right? He was unsuccessful because there were certain state and local officials in Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin and some other states who kind of stood up to this and said, no, we're not going to change the outcome here. And what's been happening since then is a concerted effort on the part of the Republican Party and allies of President Trump to change state laws to allow for the fact that in 2024, Republican-controlled state legislatures can actually undo the outcome of the election in a more quote-unquote legal way, not by storming the Capitol, but by setting in place now procedures and mechanisms by which they can simply say, this didn't reflect the will of the people, even though, Kamala Harris got the most votes in Wisconsin. We don't believe that to be accurate. So we, the Republican legislature, are going to appoint our own slate of electors for Ron DeSantis. Again, whoever, depending on who the two nominees are. And that to me is much more aligned with a soft coup. And that's a very, very real thing that is happening right now. And so I don't want to be dismissive of January the 6th. There absolutely should be accountability for that. But boy, I wish there wasn't so much looking backwards and that there was more looking at what's going on right now and looking forwards, because we are on, all it takes is one state to undo the popular vote of the people and our election system crumbles.
Do you think this will happen again, Neil?
Yes, absolutely. I would be shocked if it didn't.
John, you think it will happen again? J6?
Probably not at the U.S. Capitol, but I think the concern is, will it happen at other state capitals or somewhere else? I mean, the amount that they invested to reinforce security and everything. But the Washington Post series, from what I've read, is that the FBI, Homeland Security, the people that should have known did know that there was a real potential for violence. I think a lot of people figured it would be in the street somewhere. They thought it would be the Trump supporters versus the anti-Trump people out on Pennsylvania Avenue or whatever. They were truly caught off guard. But the other interesting thing is, you talk about prosecuting people, and there have been more than 600 people that are being prosecuted or have had plea deals or whatever. People that got into the Capitol, assaulted Capitol police officers. But there's a federal judge, I think it's an administrative federal judge, a woman, who was raising questions about what she thought were light sentences in plea deals for some of the people that were in there and trespassing and attacking people. Says this is not breaking into some government building somewhere. This was an attempted coup. I don't know if he said that, but that's pretty interesting. So even a federal judge is questioning the federal prosecutors for some of the plea deals. But again, that's still unfolding. And some of them are still in federal custody awaiting trial.
Willie, 45 days for storming the Capitol. Is that enough time?
Oh, no. I mean, I think that if we respect, and I used to live in Washington, D.C., and I'm from a small town in Alabama. So when I lived there, every time I saw the Capitol, I actually saw the hands of the people who you don't hear about who built that Capitol. So it gave me a lot of pride knowing that people I'm descended from who don't get recognition for it built that Capitol. So it should be a place that should be honored. And they show the greatest amount of dishonor, not just to the legacy of what's important to me, but also the legacy of what we teach young people about the significance of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. 45 minutes is a slap on the hand. 45 days, is a slap on the hand. They should be locked up. They have enough technology to connect anybody with facial recognition software to anybody who went into that Capitol should be locked up and prosecuted for trespassing, treason, and anything else you can throw at them. Like I said, we have done this from a judicial standpoint to Black African people forever. We would throw charges on people for doing something as small as looking like they were going to respond negatively to a police officer. We throw the book at them, and that's not being done here, and that's what should be done. And the head leader should be the main one that they should throw the book at, because He dishonored his role as president. Throughout his presidency, he allowed his ego to take control of everything he touched or responded to. And so nobody should have been surprised about that. But one thing I do want to talk about that we're not talking about is the significance of the organizing that went into this day. Like I said, I think it was a protracted assault that started when we started hearing about these state capitals that were being captured. And you know the story about, I think it was the governor of Michigan who was threatened to be, I don't know if she was going to be kidnapped or something.
Right.
But this is nonsense. I mean, I can't even imagine sitting in a room, or what type of individual sits in a room and makes the decision to kidnap a sitting governor and taking over some capital. All that is weird to me. So
was that Michigan?
Yeah, that was Michigan, the governor of Michigan. They threatened to kidnap her, I guess, along the time they thought that she was going to be the vice presidential running mate. I don't know what, I can't imagine how that came about. But again, it culminated into some of the most disrespectful actions against the United States government ever. And they should make an example out of these people. And I want to reinforce here, and everybody knows this, and I didn't even, I think it was the same day of this sacking at the Capitol. A friend of mine called me, and this is a white lady, and the first thing she said, if these were black people, they would have been mowed down with guns. And I didn't think about that at the time because I was in shock myself. But the reality is that's true. If a black person or any team of black people would have attempted to appear to look like they were going to go into that Capitol to do anything, to throw ice cream around the lobby, they would have been mowed down. And that didn't happen that day. And the other thing I want to close by saying is we talk about how disrespectful these terrorists were, but the other thing that slaps me in the face is after these years of these tough politicians and congresspeople and senators, not one of them stood up on that day in the face of that nonsense. And that kind of is a note that I take, because anybody who turned tail and ran should not be elected.
Neil, I see you itching to say something over
Yeah,
there.
I want to pick up on what Willie said, because Willie's just dead right about all of this. And there's an image that I can't get out of my head in terms of this disconnect about law enforcement and how they treat people of color versus white people. And you have all these stories about disproportionate police force against people of color, and you hear anecdotally, but we know this to be the case, that Black parents have to tell their kids how they're supposed to interact with police officers and the degree of care, because they live in fear when their kids go out into the communities that they're going to become a statistic. And these are conversations that white parents just don't have to have with their children. And then I picture, and I'm sure you guys are going to know the image that I'm talking about, that one, and Willie's right to use the word terrorist, I'm going to use the same word, that one terrorist who broke into Nancy Pelosi's office, sitting in her chair with his feet up on the desk, right? Because in his mind, he's above accountability, right? There's no accountability for him. And there's just this disconnect, this almost like a juxtaposition between him thinking, I'm white, there's not going to be any accountability, I can do what I want because this is my country, right? This is my office, I can put my feet up on the desk. And you compare that to what people of color, forget storming the Capitol, just going out to buy something at the 7-Eleven, right? That they have more fear and are more concerned with police interactions than this guy who tried to undermine our democracy is a huge, huge problem. And to me, if there are people out there who don't see that, that's just terrifying.
John, how do we move forward?
Well, that's a tough question. I
Good luck
wanted
with
to
that,
kind of
John.
throw out something. You talk about all these people that stormed the Capitol, and it was 99.9% white, and they're flying in from San Diego and Iowa and to spend that much money to and then to go to the protest, you stay at the Hyatt or whatever. That's incredible. But just think, and I'm convinced that all of those people that went in there, whatever they did, whether they just were trespassing, got caught up in the moment, were convinced that that was okay, that the president said, hey, that's okay to take back our country or democracy. And that in their minds, oh, we're just going to go back to the hotel tonight, have a couple of beers, and then fly back home. Some of them did, but then their own social media posts, Facebook Live and everything else, allowed the FBI and others to track them down. So it's just, maybe it goes back to maybe, okay, well, we're white or something, and this is what our leader told us to do. And I think that some of the people that are still in federal custody are just thinking, well, wait a minute, I did what I thought the president told me to. It's just bizarre. It's so twisted. Incredible.
What will happen to Donald Trump?
I think what's happening to Donald Trump is what he wants to happen. Donald Trump is the mastermind. Donald Trump is about Donald Trump. Everything they've ever said about this guy, this impeached guy, is true. It's all about him. This, glamorizes him, gives him an opportunity to be this figure forever to anti-American zealots. And that's what he wants. He can go into either direction. He can be a threat to the Republican nomination in the next election. He's already showing that by galvanizing. He's not even doing any of this. He's got enough people who are so full of hate that they organize on the ground for him. And as a result of that, he threatens any senator or congressman who has a tough race in the primary, because as everybody on this call knows, and any upstart campaign should know, the easiest way to knock off a sitting elected official is to get them in the primary, particularly in races where we have Republicans and these old school Democrats who've never had a challenger in the primary. So he's a threat in regard to that. He's the same threat that other conservative movements have been in the past, whether we're talking about, whatever plan, all of any type of subversive movement that has knocked off people in the primary. He is that organization now, and Republicans got to deal with this if they want to be remembered for what they're doing across this country, and none of it is good. Absolutely none of it is good. And I'm talking about not expanding Medicare in all these southern states. In every southern state where you don't have expansion of Medicare, you have people dying of COVID. In every state, you have people who are not getting vaccinated. Families are being just dying consistently. So all of these are tales of the tape, and it's blood on the ground. And that's what's so disrespectful about this to the American people and to people who want to believe something, but they're believing the wrong thing. But this is consistent with the history of particularly these southern states. We're talking about critical race theory and the reality of the lies that have been told to white people for years, manufactured lies, and the threat of critical race theory being something that could clear up all that nonsense, and they're against it. This is no different than any of that. That for some reason people want to believe in just being opposed to something just to be opposed to it, and that's the history of this anti-American fervor that has been consistent since this country was built, but more particularly defined by what happened with the Confederacy and lead up to the Civil War and beyond.
John,
it's all the same thing.
John, Marjorie Taylor Greene hit with four more fines for refusing to wear a mask. This is a Georgia legislator. Any thoughts?
Well, it's shameful that she was elected. I mean, I'm supposed to be objective, but it used to be that you got elected to for the good of the people, it's beyond you. And that goes for anybody in the General Assembly or the Baltimore City Council or mayor's office or whatever. that you're putting, your constituents and the good of the city or the country ahead of them. And with Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of these other new right-wing Republicans, it's all about them. So they know that if she doesn't go by the rules or whatever in the Capitol or elsewhere, this is what her constituents want. They like that rebellious spirit, but she's not representing people, and it just, I don't know, that's very concerning to me. The other thing is, I don't think there's any question Donald Trump is going to run in 2024. There's nobody else on the horizon. I think you have these some of these Republican governors, Ron DeSantis of Florida, Greg Abbott of Texas, Kristi Noem of South Dakota. It's kind of like they're auditioning for the running mate, Trump's running mate, because they know that if he decides to get in the race, nobody's going to challenge Trump. But I think from all of that we've read, I don't think there's any question that he's going to run again. And he's got these super PACs. I mean, one of them's got over $100 million. There are other super PACs that are, they're collecting like at least 1 million a day from people all over the country. And that's to discourage, maybe other Republicans from running. And, he's going to dole out that money to the people running for Senate and Congress that are loyal to him. And to me, it's pretty frightening.
John, is the Republican Party over? Is this now the Trumpian party?
Well, it seems like in 2021, sure. I mean, the election was 1 year ago. And the other interesting thing is my wife and I recently drove to Hanover, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, what's up?
It's like 30 miles up the road or whatever. There's a big billboard kind of near the Maryland-Pennsylvania line, a huge billboard with Trump's face on it and says, Pennsylvania, we're counting on you. We need you. Well, that billboard was put up more than a year ago. So billboards, whoever's paying for that, are you paying for it month to month, or is that billboard just going to stay up through 2024? I mean, isn't that incredible that it's just, you just don't pay for a billboard for 4 years or whatever. So that's really something into itself. Again, I mean, he's the nominee in 2024 as far as I'm concerned.
Come on, Neil. Okay, so not only are legislators not wearing the mask, Neil, cops have come on the scene and said they are not wearing the mask. Now, help me out with that.
Oh boy, way above my pay grade. I can't answer that question. I think this has become how the wearing of masks became this politicized is such a reflection of our society right now in general, and it's sad and very distressing because it should have been the most basic, fundamental thing, and especially when you're dealing with police officers whose job it is to serve and protect. That's what they signed up for very specifically, and they interact day to day with members of the public. This idea that somehow their right not to wear a mask, which is sort of kind of silly to me, supersedes their obligation to maintain the safety and security of the people they chose. Remember, nobody forced anybody to be a police officer. That they chose, the people they chose to serve and protect. I just don't understand. Let me, Donnie, if I can, address that Trump point for a second, because John's right. I mean, this is Trump's party. There is no two ways about it. He's the nominee in 2024 if he wants it. There's nobody who can stand in his way. Take a step back and think about it this way. He literally led an insurrection on the Capitol that threatened the lives of his vice president and members of Congress. He attempted to undo an election. And even if you take that out of the equation, from a political point of view, in one 4-year term, when he took office, Republicans held both houses of Congress. And in one 4-year term, he cost them the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, right? The Republican Party, between all of those things, had every incentive to kick him to the curb for political reasons. And not only have they not done that, he is strengthened. There were only 10 Republican members of Congress in the House who voted to impeach him the second time. Of those 10, 2 of them have already announced they're not running for re-election because they don't think they can survive a primary. And the third one, Liz Cheney, was kicked out of her leadership position in the House. So I don't know how anybody objective can look at that set of facts and say that Trump does not have a complete stranglehold on the Republican Party.
Wow.
Oh, the other thing is, what are the numbers in Baltimore City? Only about 50% of the police officers have been vaccinated. I'm not sure what the exact number is.
It's not a high number.
To me, that's astonishing. If you're a police officer or a firefighter in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, you're dealing with people on the front lines. You're dealing with people they may not have masks. They may not have been vaccinated. They may be bleeding. They may be in. I'm going to be the first guy. If I'm a first responder, I'm the first guy in line to get that vaccine, the booster. Give me an injection every week, so I'm protecting myself and my family. This is, there's a real problem in New York City, where the there's like a sick out or something like that. They don't want to work. I mean, why would you not get vaccinated?
I mean, this issue, John, this issue of mandates, vaccine mandates has also become like the mask issue, right? It's become completely politicized.
Right.
And the reality is there are certain positions within our society where a vaccine mandate is necessary, right? And this whole conversation is really stupid because take schools, for example. Now there's all this pushback about vaccine mandates in schools and all these Republicans saying, we're not going to do that over our dead body, right? We freedom this, freedom that. We literally have had vaccine mandates in schools for longer than any of us have been alive. Right. And nobody has said word one about it. For polio, for mumps, for rubella, for measles, you name it. Kids cannot go to school unless they have these vaccines. And all of a sudden, this has become the greatest threat to freedom since the Civil War. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is manufactured.
Well, I want to take exception to that. There have been a strong movement of people who are anti-vaccinations. They use whatever reason, whether it's religious liberty or whatever, who have been opposed to vaccinations. I think with this thing, as Neil expressed earlier, it's such a political thing that it has nothing to do with the COVID vaccine at this point at all. It's just people are taking whatever political position, and there are different types. There are religious opposition. There's this political piece that I think is stronger than all of it. And there's also this conspiratorial stuff based on whatever you want to make up at the time. And just 2 days ago, I sat with a friend who felt that not only was COVID in place for zero population increase or whatever, and it fits into that narrative because we have so many people who are dying that that everything is working the way it's supposed to work, but it's being expanded because of this sucking of resources that humans do. All that being said, it is clear to me that the public health community has not done their job at seeing that coming. It's like there's a disconnect from the role of the public health community, who only focuses on one thing, and that's maximizing vaccination, which is not working. And they should pivot to showcase how the public health community can give everybody what they need, and literally meeting people where they are. So everybody in these areas can have the resources to exist the way they want to, as long as their existence doesn't infringe on someone else's. Now it could be impossible to do because maybe it's never been done, but that's the only way we can have everyone satisfied, because the political stuff is going to get somebody hurt because there are people who don't have the information they need. And everybody's using this word, just follow the science, and both sides are using it, which is hilarious to me. But I'm sorry for even saying both sides. Everybody has, I guess, their own role, and I don't want to minimize a person's feelings. But I do think that the larger role is for the public health community to understand this is bigger than what they have been able to produce or orchestrate in the past. and a new strategy needs to be applied. And that strategy includes meeting everybody where they are and giving them the information so that, we can reduce the spread. And I'm going to close with this, that before COVID, it was the fact that the flu killed 60,000 people a year. And my question is 60,000 people dying annually from COVID, is that considered success?
I'm glad you asked that. Let me segue over to Neil. Neil, we look at COVID through American lenses. Being a native of South Africa, what are people seeing there or other places? For instance, in America, we talk about Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna. What's the conversation like in South Africa?
Yeah, the short answer is very similar. I'm going to circle back to something Willie said and then pick up on that, Donnie, because Willie, I didn't mean to cast sort of aspersion. I didn't mean to lump everybody in the same basket. Let me be more clear about what I meant. To me, the part that's ridiculous isn't generically people who are opposed to vaccines. There have been plenty of people who've been opposed to vaccines long before COVID, and people have the right to make those decisions for themselves. To me, the part that's ridiculous is the freedom component, that somehow all of a sudden this is this massive invasion on freedom, that likes of which we've never seen before. And that to me is the part of the conversation that I find to be sort of crazy. If you want to be skeptical of taking vaccines because you have an inherent skepticism and you've done research and you've determined that it's not in your best interest, I'm very respectful. I disagree with it, but I'm respectful of it. If you think somehow being made to do something is this massive invasion of liberty, that's where you and I are going to have a disagreement. So I just wanted to clarify that point and make that distinction. Donnie, internationally, the conversation is actually very similar to what we're seeing here. Not so much in the context of the freedom component. I think that's unique to America. But I think you see the skepticism. There's anti-vax movements in every country. I know in South Africa specifically, you've seen some of it. I think a lot of it has to do for very similar reasons here in the U.S. I think there's an inherent skepticism among people of color when the government is sort of mandating or trying to, to get them to take something based on historical experience. And I think you see some of that in South Africa as well. And the vaccination rates have not been as high as they would have liked. We've had certain breakouts in South Africa. The Delta variant, when it came out, was very, very destructive, although they've since been able to get it somewhat more under control. I agree with Willie's point that overall, and that you've seen this in other countries as well as America. I think the science has been out in front of the information component. They've been sort of almost too successful in getting the vaccines ready that we haven't been able to really educate people on them and get people who are on the fence to fall on the side of taking the vaccine. And I think certainly the powers that be need to do a better job of that. But overall, internationally, I think you probably see the vaccination rates marginally ahead of what they are in the United States. But some of the skepticism that you see here exists everywhere. Again, to me, the biggest component that you see here that you do not really see anywhere else is this idea of sort of it being an invasion of freedom. That to me has been uniquely American and uniquely destructive.
Mm-hmm. John Rydell, I wanted to ask you, what role does the media play in this ongoing COVID saga? For instance, Neil just mentioned the variant. I haven't heard that word in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. Dr. Fauci, 1 minute, well, in the beginning, he was hailed the hero, but lately it's as if the media is slowly chiseling away at his reputation. What role does media play in all of this?
Well, just report the facts for the people that know what they're talking about. And, because this thing has changed month to month, and we're 18 months going on 2 years now. So, we know a lot more now than we did 6 months ago. So what disturbs me is that when people are basing their decision whether to get vaccinated on the fact that they love a cable news talk show host who's not a doctor, he's not a scientist, epidemiologist, but it's something, somebody that they watch every night, whether it's Sean Hannity or, Tucker Carlson, and they're, yeah, and then the so-called experts, are they really experts for whatever reason? But we get back to the politics of it. Life is a gamble, and at this point in time, you have a choice. Yes, some people have an adverse reaction after they get the vaccine, but there's no evidence to suggest that 6 months after being vaccinated, people are developing, these long-term, problems or whatever. Channel 11 just did a story last week on two of their veteran reporters, Jane Miller and Barry Sims. They both got COVID before the vaccine was available. So I guess it was earlier in the year, and Barry was hospitalized for 3 weeks. I mean, that's frightening. And I'm sure that he thought, am I going to survive this? So they interviewed him and they interviewed Jane Miller, and both of them have these long haul symptoms. And they don't know if they're going to have them for the rest of their lives or whatever. But it just, so, they're just saying, you know what? I mean, you got a choice. You can not get vaccinated or risk getting this and spreading it to somebody else or dying. And, Jane's 66 or 67. Barry is maybe a little bit younger. So fortunately, they're both back at work, but they're not 100%. And they don't, if you look closely, they're not doing a lot of live reports. They're kind of easing them back in there. But to me, the misinformation that you see on some of these networks, I mean, I think Fox News is the biggest culprit. And, the people that are delivering the message, Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, if their corporate bosses didn't like what they were doing, they would yank them off the air or say cease and desist. So this goes up the food chain to Rupert Murdoch, the head of News Corp. So the revenue that they're generating is phenomenal, and these guys are making like $20 and $30 million a year, and so they don't want to do anything that may alienate their audience, even if it's telling the truth, reporting the facts, because if they lose ratings, they may lose their job. It shouldn't be that way.
Let me shift gears a bit to Maryland politics. Since we've had you guys on, you smiling, Willie. Since we've had you guys on last, let's see, the comptroller's race, there's Brooke Learman. She seems to be waxing the mayor of Bowie, Tim Adams. I see Brooke Learman everywhere. In the governor's race, of course, you got Francho, Tom Perez, Sharon Baker, John King, Wes Moore, a bunch of names. But last week, by the way, Francho picked a running mate, and within 24 hours, it came out that Jay Walker's wife had a $115,000 tax lien and voted on some legislation she should have stayed away from. But the real interesting one was no sooner than Congressman, former Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown sticks his head out there for Attorney General. Is seemingly within minutes, okay, maybe 24 hours. If he served, then the O'Malley's returned to serve. And now we have first-time candidate for political office, Judge Katie O'Malley, going against former Martin O'Malley Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown. Come on, John, break it down for me.
I think the Democrats are disorganized everywhere in this state, and it's the worst thing in the world. I don't see any coordination anywhere about doing anything strategically, and it should be all about winning the governor's race. And all these details you just explained create turbulence for that to be unreachable. And quite frankly, and I say this, and I'm across the state, the only hope that they have to easily win on the governor's race is that Delegate Cox is elected for the Republican nomination. That would make it easy. Anything else is going to be a challenge for the Democrats, considering what's going to happen when all of the dust settles on the Democratic primary. You're not going to have any friends to coordinate for the general, and I don't see anyone with the capability or ability to bring everybody together in Prince George's County, in Montgomery County, in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, or anywhere else, Howard County. It's a mess. It's a mess. And name one person who could. I turn on all you guys. Who is a leader in the Democratic Party who can organize all this?
How about you, John? John, Neil, help me out.
John, have at it, because I'm not sure I have an answer to that question.
Wow, Hogan's popularity is really incredible, and it's unlike any other state in the country that's a Democratic state. I just don't see that being repeated. Kelly Schultz is a well respected in her party, and is the governor's commerce secretary. This is very interesting, though. Remember, before she was commerce secretary, she was the labor secretary. Well, imagine if Hogan hadn't switched her over to be commerce secretary, she would be overseeing the mess with the unemployment benefits, the thousands of people that have been delayed getting the benefits. It was a debacle. It was they were overwhelmed, and then they had thousands of people that were trying to scam the system. So I think it really depends on who wins that primary, and it's just far too early to even speculate who has a chance. I think a lot of people have already written about lieutenant governor running mates that it's a one-day story, and then you kind of forget who the running mate is. So that wasn't a good start by Peter Franchot. He's the tax man. He's just not a state senator or something.
I didn't hear that story, by the way.
It's Monique Anderson Walker, who is first term councilwoman from Prince George's County, was selected to be Franchot's running mate. And then it came out, as Donnie said, about the tax liens, I think, with her and her husband, Jay Walker, who's a state delegate and former NBA player. So NFL. I think he played for the Vikings and Cowboys many years ago. But those optics don't look good. Peter Franchot, I think, probably has the best name recognition statewide, but it's way too early to tell. And will his close alliance, for the most part, with Governor Hogan, will that be a detriment to people? And the people that vote in the primary are generally, on the Democratic side, maybe more progressive, and on the Republican side, more conservative, I guess. So, the other thing is what they're trying to do in the General Assembly is the problem with picking these lieutenant governor running mates is, if you're an established public official, let's take State Senator Jill Carter, and she, possibly might be picked by somebody, or could be, as a running mate. I don't think she's going to do that, because if that person loses in the primary, then she's out of the General Assembly, and she's really risen in power and respect in the General Assembly. So I think what they want to do is to have a constitutional amendment that would say, okay, you don't need to pick a running mate until after the primary. So if Peter Franchot or Wes Moore, or whoever wants to run, you register as a candidate, then you have the primary, and if you win, then you can pick whoever you want, because most people don't really vote for a lieutenant governor candidate. And by that time, will it make all that much difference? But you might get a better quality lieutenant governor candidate than you are today.
John, there's an argument. The last 3 lieutenant governors have been black men.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may not have they may not have a lot of power, but rest assured, Martin O'Malley took a lot of time in choosing Anthony Brown.
Mm-hmm.
There would be no Hogan without a Boyd Rutherford. And there certainly wouldn't have been an Ehrlich without a Michael Steele.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the other thing I'll add to that is you left out, I guess, Lieutenant Governor Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. She was, I guess, considered, a new thing. I think was she the first female lieutenant governor?
I think so.
I guess that was progressive at the time.
Yeah.
And it was, the hope of planting a seed for someone who who could have always been well funded. It didn't work out that well for her. But I think that
She was arrogant.
what'd you say?
She was very arrogant.
I never really met her, but my point is, it seems like that role, and I think in the last Hogan's popularity, I think Hogan's election was based on he was not a politician, or he was not a prior elected official, and I think that energy is there. I mean, I think, quite frankly, people are sick of these long-term elected officials, and I think that's going to play out in this next election. I will predict, and this ain't the topic of this conversation, but I will predict that it might be the case that we elect a governor who has not been in elected office.
Oh, that would be John King, Tom Perez, Wes Moore.
Tom Perez has been in elected office before.
What was he?
He was a council member, I think, in Montgomery County.
Oh, well, he's making his way to Baltimore, I understand.
He's doing a good job at campaigning, but I do think that if he is elected, it will be because of what you just said. People don't know that he had prior experience, and it's not recent experience for him. Mm-hmm. He comes as a party person and all that kind of stuff, and an Obama appointee. You don't hear him mention anything about being elected, and I think that's a good thing, because I think that Maryland is. I hate to say it, guys. I think they're sick of elected people in that particular office, and I think that particular office does require someone who has some feeling of the people, has some level of something beyond legislative reputation. I think they need to be a person who's in touch with the people, but also has some executive mindset that benefits this state.
Hey, let me jump in for a second. Neil, are you buying this?
Yes and no, to give a typical lawyer answer. A guy like Tom Perez has got a real problem because he has to try and skirt a very fine line. His biggest advantage over the other candidates, to the extent he has one, is his name recognition. As labor secretary under President Obama, as head of the DNC. But what that makes him is it makes him more of an establishment type candidate. Whether or not you perceive him as somebody who held elected office, he certainly is involved in at that level. And if this is a non-establishment, non-politician election, Tom Perez has got a problem. Because his biggest selling point is the name recognition and the positions he's held. Even though Willie's right, they weren't technically elected positions other than the council member position. They were significant enough that he's going to be perceived as being an insider. He's just not going to be able to run as an outsider and have that somehow coalesce with the name recognition. So Tom Perez has got a problem, and he's going to have to pick a lane at some point. He hasn't had to yet, but he will. I have no idea what's going to happen in the primary on the Democratic side. I genuinely don't. I think there's a lot of good candidates there. Nobody yet has broken away from the pack. I think your point about Francho is right. I think it's the biggest vetting mistake in picking a running mate since John McCain and Sarah Palin in 2008. I don't know how anybody misses that. That to me is shocking, especially given Francho's position and what he's touting about his candidacy. That's mind-blowing to me. And I actually think, quite candidly, separate and apart from that, I think it speaks to a lack of competence, which is directly relevant to how somebody's going to govern.
Whoa.
Well, it does. I mean, if you as a campaign overlook something that basic, I question your competency to make decisions. There is no bigger decision that a candidate makes in a campaign than their running mate. Mm-hmm. And if you can't get that right.
Let me jump in, Neil. They had a Black Agenda forum by the Black Caucus where each candidate was to show up and share their thoughts on a Black agenda. What I remember vividly, Rashawn Baker was the most apologetically black man I've ever met in my life. The marquee says Black Agenda, and he's talking about people of color. So we're going to check that one off.
I don't. Uh, I don't understand what you meant, Donnie. Could you
The
explain that?
topic was the Black agenda.
Right.
He shifted the verbiage to people of color. No, we're talking about Black people. This is the Black caucus. We're not talking about anything else but Black people. What I'm getting to, Will, is what some call post-traumatic slave disorder, where people are afraid to say I'm Black in front of
Okay.
white people. Okay. Francho. I got to say this about Francho. Francho came out and said, number one, go to my website. Now, you at the Black Caucus Forum on the Black Agenda, he said, go to my website. Now, if that wasn't O'Malley-ish, I don't know what is. Number two, he said, what's his name, Francho, he said he had to leave early because his wife was having surgery. So, number one, you never addressed the issues verbally. You told me to go to your website and you leave early. I don't know. I just thought that was disrespectful myself. But hey, who am I?
Let me. I want to mention Wes Moore, who we really haven't talked about. You know, he might be the sleeper candidate. He may be. Again, it's way too early to even have any polls because it's not on people's minds. Yeah, they're still concerned about COVID and vaccines, but I mean, he's got a compelling story. He's got a compelling upbringing. I recently read his book, The Other Wes Moore. I actually, his father died at a young age. I actually remember talking to his father on the phone. He was a radio newscaster, and I was out of college, and he was pretty well respected in DC. It's a whole other story. I just had a brief phone conversation with him, but you know, he's going to raise a lot of money. He is really, you know, the Baltimore candidate. But again, I don't know that that's as important as it used to be. So I just think that you know, will he beat out Doug Gansler and Rashern Baker? Maybe. I don't know. When guys come back to run that lost 4 years ago or 8 years ago, I just wonder how the voters view them. Is it like, you know, kind of like a Trump mindset? Well, I think I could have been a good governor, so I come back. Or are they looking for new ideas?
He lost to a guy from out of state.
Who did?
Rashern Baker came second to Ben Jealous. Have you seen Ben Jealous?
Well, let's say that the point I was making earlier about Trump being visible during the off season, that type of stuff is important. And certainly, I'll just say it's important to me. If an individual ran for office and they came up short, you know, you're not going to win them all. But if you really were committed to that particular race, stay visible, stay in the community, you know, lick your wounds, but pick up on issues that matter throughout 4 years or 8 years that can give you more credibility if you wish to run again. A lot of these guys lost, and I haven't seen them since then.
Yeah.
And so, what I mean, I haven't seen them doing things that matter in this state since that time. He mentioned Wes Moore, and Wes Moore, while he wasn't elected, he never ran. There was always these rumors about him running for something. During COVID, he was sending food to Baltimore City. I guess it could have been other places. The only reason I know this is because my organization was a recipient of some of this food for the community here. And during that period, there was a significant need for this type of thing in communities that were cut off from services and people were afraid to go places. So I don't know if he was trying to plant those seeds then, but that's something I remember. And that's something that I think the people in the communities remember. I don't know if he can connect the dots on that being a turnout piece, but he did plant some seeds. And the other thing I'll say about him, because John was talking about his story, I do think that story resonates. I also think what John said was, you know, there's no energy around the race at all. Somebody's got to make it a street fight. I don't know who it is, but until they do that, again, it's the case of the Democratic reality in Maryland. It's just a bunch of stuff, and it's not something strategic. It's not something compelling, and nobody is really standing out right now.
John, the Goucher poll says that the next governor of Maryland will be Hoganish.
That's funny.
I think it depends on who wins that primary. I think if you have, I don't know, like, Rashawn Baker or Doug Gansler or somebody, and they don't really, in other words, they beat out everybody because they got 23% as opposed to 22%, and they don't create a lot of excitement, then you have to be concerned, will Democrats stay home because they just don't, maybe they're focused on Trump or national issues or COVID or something like that. And then that Goucher poll that says, okay, well, maybe Kelly Schultz, she's going to get the Hogan money and the backing. I don't see it, but I mean, I think maybe she has a chance if the Democratic nominee just doesn't excite people.
Well, she's got to get her staff together because they're saying that her staff is horrible, the people around her. And I'll just share, it's often not the celebrity, it's not the leader, it's often the entourage. So a caution to all of the candidates, be careful who you have answering your phones and returning your messages and returning emails. Willie, you can relate?
I can relate to that, to a few of these candidates that I've had to interact with. And I want to say this about the Commerce Secretary. She came onto our NAACP state conference, and she's making a pitch that can be compelling if she sells it right. I don't know if it was as polished as it could be, but that's important to get into the room. And you also have to do this stuff that Donnie is talking about and have the right people organizing on the grassroots. Now, somebody mentioned earlier what I have seen in the last 20 or so years since I've been around Maryland is that I don't think that everyone has picked up on the fact that in the past, there has been this expectation that state senators would control the day on the general election. I guess the gubernatorial candidates would give the state senators the leverage to mobilize on the ground. And I don't think that's working anymore. And for a lot of reasons, particularly in the city of Baltimore, where before the year 2000, it meant more to have Baltimore senators with a gubernatorial candidate than it does today, because there are fewer Senate districts. And as you recall, with the 1994 election of Paris Glendenning, it was decided on the east side. So all those pieces, I don't think the Democratic Party is doing their job to organize all that so it benefits the gubernatorial candidate. As you remember, and I think it was when did I guess it was 2012 when Anthony Brown won the nomination. Was it 2012? 2014 or whenever it was, when Anthony Brown won, he gave control over Baltimore City to Senator Pugh at the time, without knowing that she was getting ready to run for mayor. And I don't know if she turned out to vote the way. Obviously, he didn't win, but he had the same problem in Prince George's County at not a enthusiastic turnout. And my point is, in the past, the state senator is supposed to make that enthusiastic turnout happen. And that means bolstering a turnout and not just getting just enough for the senator to win his or her race, but to really energize the base so that a governor can win. And I don't think that has happened in the last two elections. And that's what's got to happen if a Democrat is going to win governor this time.
Okay, we got 2 minutes left. Neil, John, any final thoughts?
Yeah, really quick. I think, Donnie, this is something that has come up on the show before. We talk about Larry Hogan. I think Larry Hogan's election and then re-election has had a number of potential positive ramifications. But one of the main ones, I think, has been to make sure that Democratic politicians in the state of Maryland understand that they don't have a God-given right to the vote of Black people. And I think there were a lot of Black people who crossed over and voted for Larry Hogan because they perceived him as being genuine and sincere. And I think it is a wake-up call, and there's quite frankly probably even a national message in there somewhere, that Democrats in general and the Democratic Party should not take their most loyal and sizable voting bloc for granted.
I just wanted to say one thing.
They still do.
Well, it's a wake-up call because they're going to keep losing elections if they keep doing it.
There's no discipline in the party, so they're not getting
I don't disagree with that.
I appreciate your observation, but I don't think they get it.
That's for them to, right? Like, the message is there. Now, whether they take it or not is up to them.
I just wanted to make a point real quick. Whomever Kelly Schultz chooses as a running mate is extraordinarily critical. She can't make a mistake like Peter Franchot made. And who knows who she would select, but to me, it would have to be an African-American, maybe somebody on the Baltimore City Council. Would they? But they're not going to. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm losing my mind here. Who do you pick? I mean, who do you pick as an African-American running mate, or is that possible for a Republican? So
who would a Wes Moore pick, being he's from Baltimore? You got 4 gubernatorial candidates from Montgomery.
Yeah.
You've got Prince George's that has, all of their council people are committed. Who would a Wes Moore pick?
I think he could look at somebody like Michael Rosenbaum, who is not a politician, who's not, hasn't been elected to anything, has built a company significant. If you look at his history, the only reason I know is because we were in Greater Baltimore leadership together, and his company was a startup in 2017. Now he's like a millionaire or something crazy. So he did all that in a very short period of time. And he's saying some good stuff about workforce development. He's actually practically done it. So that's kind of someone he should look at. And he's getting a taste of what it feels like out there if he's never done it in his life. So that's somebody for Wes Moore to look at, or for, whatever. One of them could be governor, one could be lieutenant governor. They're both good guys.
Hey, maybe Kelly Schultz could pick Michael Steele. He's available.
I don't. Why would he want to do that again? He probably would want the governor's spot.
Yes,
I'm sure he would.
I'm not even sure Michael Steele self-identifies as a Republican anymore. I think he spends a lot of time on MSNBC. Last time I checked, I might be wrong about that.
Could you serve more than 2 terms as a lieutenant governor running mate? I don't even know if that's in the Constitution.
I actually don't know either.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming out. Anything you want to share before we cut it off? Thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. Good conversation.
Good deal.
60,000 is success.
What?
60,000 is success.
He's talking about the COVID number, Donnie. Call the call back.
Oh, okay. Good deal. Gentlemen, have a powerful day. Good morning, world.
Thanks. Take care.